Hi. This question comes up again and again. And it came up last night while I was out having dinner with friends. And the question was asked to me, how is it possible if someone is realized that they could do any harm or behave in any abusive way, for example, sexual abuse, or if someone is realized, how can they play out those behaviors? How is it even possible? And this question was asked to me last night, and I find it a very innocent question. And I'd like to unpack it a little bit. So, first of all, self realization. Like the question he asked was, if someone is self realized, how can they abuse their position or harm another in any way? So self-realization is nothing to do with it doesn't update the body mind nervous system. It doesn't suddenly just mature the nervous system or update the behaviors of the personality. It's not like an automation that happens. Self-realization is when a being realizes itself in this form as that which looks through every pair of eyes, as that what we can call godliness, the source of all things, that which gives life to these words, that which is able to hear these words and experience this moment, that which is aware right now is no different than that which is beating the heart, pumping the blood, growing the trees, crying the babies, flying the birds, barking the dogs. When self-realization, when realization, the being is realizing itself as that, the source of all that in this human form, and that there is no other entity in the form or out there. There is only that. And when this is realized by itself, it's realizing itself. When this is realized, this is not an intellectual understanding. It's not a belief. And it's not something that's practiced. You practice to become that which is realized. No. So that self-realizing has nothing to do with the maturity of the personality self or the healing of the nervous system. It doesn't update any unconscious behaviors. It's a completely, because all of that is the conditioning of the body mind, the building up of the ego self, the building up of all those belief systems and energetic experiences become memory and an energetic belief in a self that lives a world all by itself that we call ego. That is a mechanism that's operating through this body and playing out like a program. That program doesn't just update. because self-realization is happening. So that's why I have always said, like, self-recognition is the beginning. It's really the beginning. Because following the recognition, this realization, then all the unmet, unfinished business is going to come forward. It's got to be faced, it's got to be walked into. So how can a realized being take advantage of another? I would say that most of the time it's innocence as ignorance. It's unconscious. They are unconscious of the patterns at work. And the pattern is still running. If the sexuality hasn't matured, it's still running on its own old program. And it hasn't yet been updated to operate in a way that carries great responsibility and integrity. This is something that has to be learned in the body mind. And this is why there must be great humility. You know, it's not really appropriate to, when self-realization is happening, there's a realization of self, a recognition. That's not kind of like, it's not really appropriate to start then straight away teaching, going out there as a teacher, because, you know, there's so much unconscious stuff at play. It's really, really too early. There's just too many unprocessed, unseen, unfinished business that's going to play out. And so part of the old dynamic, which is changing a lot now, is that of course it's changing a lot because we all live and learn, right? But the seeker, the old way of the seeker going to the guru, immediately out of the fantasy of the finished human, like the seeker having this fantasy of like, they've realized they're completely finished, they have the authority, and just giving all the authority over there. There is a responsibility in that too. And that too is innocence and ignorance. So the whole thing is playing out of innocence and ignorance most of the time. I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, right? But then I can already hear the voice saying, yeah, but if that's a realized being, they should know better, and they should not be ignorant, and they should and da 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 and da da da. But that's all of the loaded expectation that is expected on what a realized being is. Yeah, because there's the idea and the belief that that means that the personality is going to be all updated just by itself, just like that. But it's not. It's not. It's a walking into that process. One has to walk into the human from this place of realizing. And as we walk into the human, meeting all of the places that belong to yesteryear, that are outdated, that are built on belief that belonged to a self who took itself to be separate in this world and had all these ways of thinking and seeing and behaving, is no longer appropriate. if there's realization of who you really are. But that now is like a contradiction in the system. So there's a period of time, although there's no time, there is a period of process where this an updating process has to play out. And it plays out at its best in the relational field. Yeah. So for someone who locks themselves away on top of the mountain and they're not in the world of relating, and they have taken themselves to be a realized being, and they are like sitting in absolute recognition of godliness, but they haven't looked at their person, even though there's no person, right? They haven't looked at their personality self, the behaviors, the patterning. They haven't looked, they haven't met it, they haven't met the old pains, they haven't faced any of that. Then when a student comes along, for example, if there's a teacher and there's a lot of projection coming on from the students, like and like giving the power there's great temptation. And if some sexual energy starts to play, and then usually it's he, I guess there are women too, but it's more common for men to have used that position and gone for the young women, not always young, but and of course there's an imbalance in the power dynamic there, because the student believes, the seeker believes that he knows, and they give all the power away. I've seen this play out. I've seen it play out, and in disbelief, I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, why? What are you? But when a seeker is in that mindset and they in all this belief, and they are somehow like, what can play out in the seeker is the mummy daddy stuff, and they are wanting recognition from, if it's a female going for the male guru, often it's daddy stuff, so there's all this unfinished business playing out, and it's the shadow. And I would say that 9 times out of 10, these guys, they didn't know. They were unconscious about their unfinished business. They believed themselves that there's nothing to do about all that, because they are the absolute, and there's nobody here, so they don't have to look at all that. And this is, thankfully, it's all coming out more and more now, that it's demanded that it's looked at and that it's taken responsibility, because there's great responsibility with taking the role of guiding others to self-realization. There's great responsibility. In the sense that for there to be integrity, there has to be humility. And it's through humility that maturity of the human happens. Because this human, it's an ongoing development. The human side is an ongoing development. It's never over. It's never finished. That's what human development is, right? So there's a lot of confusion around that self-realization updates the whole human thing. And out of that confusion and misunderstanding, there's been a lot of like, you're supposed to be like that, and you said that there's all of this, but it's all innocence and ignorance on both sides, I would say. and it's shadow material. And for myself, from when I very first started speaking and offering intensives, it was I was always focused with creating the space in which self-realization easily happens, because it's an energy field in which there's easily self-recognition, like creating that as the dominant space, yet always, always, always walking through the human stuff. Integration. It's always been, this is not something new in my world, in my retreats, all of the stuff I've ever been doing has always been looking at the human and this integrative process. As it was really, for me, it was in my journey, in my story, it was really something that I found at the time when I had self-realization happening. There was nobody I could ask about the human stuff. I couldn't get an answer. What about all this sexual energy? Like, what does this mean? Does it mean I'm not self-realized? Like, how does this all work together? And nobody could give me the answer at that time. There were no teachers around speaking about that. My teacher wasn't. Of course, Osho was, but he was gone, so couldn't ask him directly. But all of that had to update in my own system. All of that had to clean up. Whatever shadow was playing around my female sexuality and the way it plays in relational field, had to go through a cleaning process. And that took years, for me to really, really clean up the house, clean up the mess, all those ways in which we play, So it's a great misunderstanding. And I was quite surprised when I was asked this question last night, about how is that possible for a realized being to behave get involved in sexual abuse, because it's unconscious. And there's trauma in that personality self within that being that hasn't been processed, that hasn't been met, and it's unseen and it's playing out. So thankfully, it all started coming out, right? And gurus getting called, next one come down, next one come down. And it's part of the time that we're living in, where it's all coming for the updating of those dynamics. Because this journey of self-realization, it demands humility. For there to be integrity, there must be humility. And in that, there must be the willingness to look at our human. A constant, ongoing undoing is happening here in the human, because we are like the whole human consciousness that's ever been is in our individual consciousness, coming undone, coming undone, coming undone, right? It's all coming undone in our consciousness. And there's an updating and an ongoing embodying what we realize. So what is realized as absolute realization to be embodied into the personality self, there's a lot that has to go on dying there. Yeah, it's like an ego death is taking place in that level. So integration and embodiment are what come after self-recognition. And that's why I include all of that in all of my events. It's it's like I've always felt that there is no separation in this process. So it's always been to create the space in which the unraveling can come undone. The space it's held in the space. And because the space is so potent and so powerful, it allows for much emptying out to come undone in the field. So, yeah, all of my retreats are that way. So, the penetration of awareness and direct seeing and direct realization is really what I call the first step. And then, okay, now let's let it all come for the true seeing, for the meeting, for the update. Let's step into this body with this realization. So, yeah. That's how it can play out in a realized being, that there has been all this messiness. It's the unconsciousness. And I can remember lots of times hearing people say, but how is it possible? If they're realized, how could they behave this way or behave that way? Because that's an illusion. That itself is an illusion. That you imagine, that the seeker imagines that if they're realized, it means the human perfection. It's the imperfection, the perfection of the imperfection. And it all has to be updated. And there's a maturing process in that. So, often people can get this recognition and they think that's enlightenment. And then they think they have to start teaching straight away. And often it can be premature, because what have they got to teach? It has to be walked before there's really a depth of experience. It has to be walked. So, yeah. I have a 4-day online intensive coming up at the end of this year. I don't know when you'll be watching this, but it's 2025 and it's December. And on the 27th, I have a 4-day intensive online. It's a great way to end the year in a field of potent self-recognition while all this is being integrated. Yeah, and then we're moving into 2026, and of course the in-person retreats are like, there's nothing like it. It's a totally different thing. And there's one in April in the Algarve, and this is a very intimate setting. It's not like hundreds of people. It's a small, intimate setting. And that allows for individual attention. And yeah, it's It's an incredible way to meet as one. When a whole group of people meet as one, directly and intimately, there really is nothing like it. So I hope that clarifies that point a bit more, or maybe you already know that. And yeah, if you like this, please let me know in the comments and what you'd like to hear more of. Yeah, it's always wonderful to hear from you. Thank you for watching until now. Ciao. I honor the being you are.